everyone. Welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your host, myself, Laura Matsu, and my husband, Bernhard Gunther. And on this episode, we are going to be discussing the mother wound, a psychospiritual healing guide. The mother wound is really one of the deepest wounds we can have. Having a mother wound can affect your self-esteem, your relationships, your relationship to your body, to food, to sexuality, to other women. And almost every factor of life can be affected by the relationship with a mother. If you're a man, the relationship to your mother is the relationship you have to your own soul. So in Jungian psychology, this would be represented by what Jung called the anima, which is the feminine aspect of a man's nature. Men tend to project this anima onto women in their life. So basically the woman that men are attracted to and also can attract in their life can be reflections to how they carry their own mother's imprint within them. So if you're a man, how you see woman and the quality of the connection to your relationship to your own emotions and soul is greatly influenced by how you experienced your mother. And until you heal the mother wound, your relationships will tend to suffer. You may end up in relationships with people who treat you like your mother did. You may also just project that experience of your mother onto the people in your life as well. So you may be with someone who maybe isn't treating you exactly like your mother, but you're going to feel that they are like your mother. You may also end up acting like your mother in ways that are damaging to you or your relationships. Another thing too, I notice is very subtle, is that you can end up in a trance of false beliefs that are influenced by how you experienced your mother. And this can be completely unconscious. So this feeling like you're fundamentally unworthy, feeling like you're not good enough, feeling like you don't deserve love, even being dissociated from your own body, all of this can be affected by our relationship to our mother. You can also end up in a very unhealthy relationship with food, with your own body, or unhealthy relationships to other women, depending on how you experienced your own mother. So in this podcast, we are going to discuss the mother wound from a psychospiritual perspective. So we're going to go much deeper than the psychology of it. And we're really going to look into the more soul psychology of it. We're also going to look into the more spiritual nature of it and how our mother wound affects us both psychologically and spiritually. We're going to discuss the signs that you have a mother wound, how it can show up psychologically, how it can show up spiritually, what you need from your mother. What does it mean to have what's been termed a good enough mother? And how does the mother affect your ability to have relationships as an adult? What are some of the common core wounds of having a mother wound? And most importantly, how can you heal the mother wound psychologically and spiritually? And we're going to provide you some practical exercises near the end of this podcast to do that. I also want to note that if you have a father wound, some of this will relate to you as well, because often our mother and father wounds, the roles they play, what they did or didn't do, are mixed in together, and they have the ability to affect us in a similar way. So there's going to be lots of good info in here for you if you have a father wound. But that being said, we're going to make this a short series. So our next podcast, we're going to focus on the father wound solely. So keep your eyes posted for that. And in the second hour of this podcast, so for those who are new to our podcast, we always have a second hour where we go much deeper into the topics we covered in the first hour. You can go to veilofreality.com/membership to sign up. And you get access to the second hour of every single podcast we recorded. So in this second hour, we're going to really go much deeper into how the mother wound affects relationships specifically. So how we reenact the mother wound in relationships, how the mother wound also shows up in popular culture right now. So both on the left and the right. On the left, it's more related to safe spaces and this over focus on political correctness, how that relates to the devouring mother archetype. We're also going to be fair and equal, and we're going to talk about how the right, and especially this red pill manosphere movement, can relate to anima projection. And we're going to talk to you about anima in depth. So if you're a woman, the anima is very important for you to understand because it's also going to affect the relationship, the men in your life. And if you're a man, the anima is very important to understand because it's going to affect the relationship to women in your life. So that's going to be valuable for both men and women. And what is the anima? What is the inner feminine? How does it affect our relationships? And most importantly, how can you begin to confront the shadow of your mother within you? To get into that, we just have a quick announcement. Our newest round of Embodied Soul Awakening, our 14-week PsychoSpiritual group coaching program, has one spot left. So by the time we release this podcast, it may be filled. You can go to thetimeoftransition.com to see if we have it open, if you would like to learn more and apply. If you're listening to this at a later date or the course is filled, you can always go to thetimeoftransition.com and sign up to the waiting list, and we'll notify you for the next round. And that round begins in
August 26th.
Yeah, August 26th, the pre-work begins. So you have a couple weeks, but the spot could fill up very quickly. So if you want to join us, go to thetimeoftransition.com. Okay, so you want to just first talk about the inspiration for this podcast?
Yeah, it's a very, very important topic, and a lot of people dealing with mother wounds and father wounds. And as Laura said, it's going to be a 2-part series. So this one we focus on the mother wound, but it mostly plays out unconsciously. And I remember, like in our recent course on a group coaching program, we put out the question, what has been your biggest insight, your biggest realization that started you on the journey of inner work or the more, kind of your biggest insight you really had. And as I was contemplating on the question for myself, I realized the biggest insight I had related to a mother wound and the father wound. When I first got into Jungian psychology back in the 90s, at first I was also more intellectualized in the process. But, as I developed the ability to observe myself more on my reactions, my behaviors, I became conscious of my unconscious, at first, mother wound and father wound, because I realized that I acted out behaviors that I actually despised in my father and my mother, but I inherited them. I was acting them out. It was my shadow, and I was acting them out in relationships, not only intimate relationships, but friendships and so forth, similar to how my mom treated me or my dad based on their trauma and shadow. So I realized that I had unconscious aspects of my mother image and my father image within me that became very like an automated, mechanical personality within myself that acted out in relationship. And I would also realize that I attracted certain partners and women that was directly related to my unconscious mother image and the way she treated me.
Yeah.
On both sides, positive and negative. But there was a huge epiphany. It was a big realization that I was acting out things that I actually despised in my mom and my dad.
Yeah. And I think in general, there's quite a few people who have a mother wound. It's really important to acknowledge that if you have poor self-esteem, poor relationships, to really look at that relationship with the mother first. It's more the exception to have a very loving, caring, nurturing mother than the norm as well. So these kinds of ideal mothers that you see maybe on like sitcoms and TV shows, I don't even know if they exist. There's a few back in the 90s, maybe it's probably different now. They're probably all woke now. But it's very rare to have this really loving mother archetype, but we see it in fairy tales. We see it in movies. Even though we may not have had a good experience of our own mother, a lot of us have within our own psyche an idea of like what a good mother is and what a bad mother is. And then we project those qualities unconsciously onto the world. So I'm going to talk about some signs that you have a mother wound and how it shows up psychologically. So one of the main ways is your self-esteem. So how you see yourself. Do you see yourself as competent? Do you see yourself as worthy of love? Do you respect yourself? Do you love yourself? Your relationship to yourself is in relationship to how your mother treated you, or maybe not, she didn't treat you. So if there was like a lack of a love there, we tend to be very unloving towards ourselves. If your mother was critical, we tend to be very critical towards ourselves. So, and that's so unconscious and so deeply embedded, it can be very hard to see. And I really want to note that, because it's almost like we've been like this our whole life. We internalize the experience of her, and then we don't know any other way than the way we've been. So it can be very deeply embedded. Our beliefs about relationships are strongly imprinted by the mother. So if you constantly believe that the world will not like you, that relationships are meant to be abusive or hard or critical, or you maybe even accept emotionally unavailable relationships, a lot of that can also be affected by our mother. And especially this belief that you don't deserve love, you don't deserve relationships, that can definitely be related to a mother wound. And I just want to note, it's not what our mother does or sometimes even says. It's the quality of her presence, the energy of her, and the way that she expressed her love, even non-verbally, that's important. So we can sometimes have mothers who are really abusive and critical, and then they say they love us. But to a child has an excellent lie detector. So if a mother is feeling resentful when she was feeding or caring after the child, if she was feeling like, oh, this is a hassle, I don't want to be doing this, but then she says she loves you, you're going to actually take in her resentment and her not wanting to be a mother than her actual words. I think that's really important to acknowledge.
Yeah, that's very important, because even the example I shared about myself and this epiphany, before that, if you would ask me, how's your relationship to your parents? It's great, excellent. I have amazing parents, couldn't be any better. The great upbringing, all of that, perfectly fine, because there was no overt, quote unquote, abuse, emotional or psychological, let alone physical. It was more covert. There was more also the energy of the way my parents were carrying themselves. My dad disassociated, my mom in constant anxiety and many other things that affected me negatively.
Yeah.
And so little things that were said or not said. Sometimes it's not too much, too fast, but sometimes it's not enough. Mirroring, empathy, and all of that. And that can create an unconscious negative mother image and the mother wound. So it's not that obvious.
Yeah. And if she was checked out all the time, if she was depressed most of the time, if she was angry, if she was stressed, we pick up this energetic atmosphere and we absorb her energy, and then it becomes almost like the water that we swim in as an adult. So like we don't realize that this is the water that we swim in, but this is how subtly and subconsciously we can be affected by her. Another way it shows up is we have abandonment issues. So when we don't feel wanted by our mother, and again, even if she says this explicitly, but there's a part of her that didn't want to be a mother, we will also hold a deep fear that others won't want us. Excuse me. We have a false self that really, by the way, the abandonment and the false self, some of these, again, I just want to reiterate, some of these issues also relate to the father wound. So You just need to change the language. We have a false self. So this is really huge, but when we don't feel loved for who we are, we believe that we have to be someone else to earn love. So this is also
big one.
Very common when you have a narcissistic parent who projects this ideal image onto you that they want you to be, instead of just allowing themselves to discover and witness and support the emerging of who you really are. So even in the smallest ways, say like you're a creative person, but then you're also good at sports and your mom is really sporty and she pushes you more into the sports instead of nurturing your creative talents. So, the narcissistic parent wants the child to live out in the image of them. Actually, it's often their own unfulfilled dreams that they project onto the child. And it can also be an endless quest because nothing we do is never enough for them either. So we develop a false self when we don't feel we're loved for who we are. And that false self is usually formulated off of the ideal that the parent had for us. And that can be very difficult to unpack because, again, if you're used to performing, if you're used to being a certain type of way in order to receive love and attention, you've been doing that your whole life. You've probably been doing that from a very young age. And then to discover the true self takes a lot of inner work and healing work. This is a big one. You feel you either ignore or you feel ashamed of having needs. So, and this can also be very subtle too. Like we have to look at it how this kind of got imprinted in the popular parenting techniques of the age. So this idea of like cry it out, where that if you just leave a child to cry and cry and cry and you don't go and meet them or soothe them, that eventually they learn how to self-soothe. And we've known through attachment theory that actually the child goes into a state of collapse and they just give up on having needs. So this can, again, be very deeply embedded because this is all happening pre-verbally. So when our needs are not regularly met by our parents, we begin to believe it's wrong to have those needs. And even worse, as an adult, we get completely cut off from those needs.
And then also results in people pleasing.
Yes.
And constantly, catering to other people by completely neglecting yourself.
Yeah. And not even knowing what you want or need. I've met many people like that as well. We are hyper independent. This is very interesting. So when we don't have a sense that our mother will be there for us, we can begin to develop the belief that we need to do everything alone. So reaching out for help, support, asking someone for comfort all becomes a very dangerous, uncomfortable, anxiety-inducing thing. So, and you can see this because the mother really affects our quality of relating to others. We don't feel safe. Again, this can also be related to the father wound. So when you don't feel protected by your mother, you can begin to react to the world as if it's a dangerous place. You become hypervigilant.
That's a big one also from the Jungian psychology, the mother wound. A positive mother image relates to the world being open, that you can trust it, that you have almost expect positive experiences, not in a wishful thinking, but the healthy optimism. The world is open there. Everything is interrelated.
Yes.
You go out to take risks and embrace the world, and you have a positive attitude, and you're not overly suspicious or paranoid.
Yes.
Many people who have a mother wound, don't feel safe in this world. They right away become suspicious of every person. I would even go so far that a lot of people in the so-called truther movement have very strong mother and father wounds both because they don't trust the world, right? Everything becomes a psyop. Everybody's paranoid. Everybody's all of a sudden a targeted individual. But behind it, there's a wound that gets more exaggerated over time.
Yeah. And the most important thing is that a lot of this can become known through projection. So you're projecting your mother wound onto women in the world, onto relationships. Like it's happening around you all the time. And that's why it can be so hard to confront and unpack. Like even for me, I had a mother wound for so long. It was probably the driving force in many of the negative situations I got caught in. It was very deep and profound and traumatic, but I didn't even realize it because the denial was so strong, because what my mother told me became the narrative that I told myself. And until I started to really unpack the unconscious beliefs, my relationships, do my own psychospiritual healing, it was very hard for me to see because it was like the water that I swam in. It was all I knew.
So similar the realization I had, you took on these beliefs from what the mother told you, now with internalized telling yourself, believing these are your own thoughts.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to, you have to understand that your mother is your first connection to source, to the womb. So it's literally like the energy that you swim in. So the most important thing is that we're enlisting these because the awareness of you admitting and accepting the ways that you weren't mothered, it gives you the light that you need to heal from within. So the awareness is the first step. The awareness takes you out of denial. The awareness is where you can begin the grieving process, which is really important. But it's really important to become aware of this. And we're going to talk about it in a moment, the qualities of a good mother. Because without that awareness, then you just think that this is normal. So let's talk about how the mother shows up spiritually. This is really big. So the mother is our first experience of God, source, whatever you want to call it. So when we're in her womb, our mother is the source from which we're made from. So when our mother's womb doesn't feel inviting, perhaps she's under stress, in a bad relationship or marriage. Perhaps she has a poor relationship with her own body, or she's dissociated from her own body. Or, even worse, if she's like in a war-torn country or it's really severe what's going on around her externally, we have to we take all that in and it affects how we experience the world. So if her womb feels like a nurturing, safe environment, we also drink that in and we become nourished by it. So here's a good exercise that you can do to reflect how it was like to be in your mother's womb. Reflect on how it would be like to be enveloped in your mother's energy. How would it feel? This is how you experienced your mother as the original source. And this exercise can be really confronting.
Yes. And really the key point is feeling, not what she said, all the words, but really her presence or lack thereof.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about, so I'm going to just finish the mother as tree of life. So, and then maybe you can talk about the points below. So, another thing, this is also related to what we need from our mother, and these needs can be met by the father as well. But the mother is really the symbol of the tree of life. She's meant to provide shelter, a place of feeling like you're at home, protection. So she's also the axis in which the family revolves around. So when a woman isn't ready to attend to the needs of others and to provide shelter, a sense of home, a sense of belonging, a sense of protection, and she isn't ready to be a mother, then what happens there, actually? Because this happens a lot of the time, is a mother isn't indeed ready to be a mother, or maybe she just does it because of social pressure, or maybe she just gets pregnant accidentally. She can't actually be that source.
Yeah. Here's some really good question to ask yourselves, because it's important to become aware how our mother responds or responded to our needs, because that is crucial in our development, especially the first few years. They literally set up that template for adulthood, relationship, anything, career, all of that, how we move around in the world, all of that. So here's some questions to reflect on. Does she act like we are a burden, or does she take joy in giving to us? Is she gentle and loving in the way she speaks and touches us, or is she harsh and cold? Do her eyes convey love? Do we feel seen by her, special to her, loved by her? I would even add not only love, because love, sometimes can be just giving a lot of toys and presents and empty words, but have we been enjoyed by our mother, right? That did her eyes sparkle up when she sees you playing or creative and all of that. We take all that in, these impressions. Basically, do we feel truly seen by her, special to her? Do we feel like she's there for us and will keep us safe? Do we feel like our needs are important to her and we can turn to her for help and be supported, right? That she's a figure we can always trust and talk to about anything. That's a big one as well. That's a big measure, right? If you that kind of caretaker, because that helps you to then create a more sense of safety within the world if you have this positive mother image, what I mentioned before.
Yeah. And then you have to keep in mind everything you said. If there's a deficit, it will carry over into our adult life. So, if she's harsh and cold, we'll actually be harsh and cold towards our own emotions, our own bodies, our own needs. If we don't feel special to her, we go through this idea that we're unworthy, that we're worthless. If we feel like our needs aren't important to her, this is a really big one too. Do we feel seen by her? This is very fascinating. So if you don't feel seen by your mother, you will go through all of life desperately wanting to be seen. Yeah. And most likely never feeling like you were seen in the way that you want to, that you really need deep down inside. It would be like an endless hole within you that you can't fulfill.
Well, that can result in narcissism, right?
For sure. Yeah. And just all sorts of actions. Like we can desperately want to feel seen. And then no matter how much someone mirrors us, we will always feel that deficit. It's very fascinating. I mean, there's definitely work that can be done therapeutically where we can be accurately mirrored back by a therapist who can really connect and relate to us. But there's also an element of us also repairing that wound within ourselves.
I think it's very important to consider because both mother wound and father wound, which we will discuss as well in the next episode, what we haven't received as a young child in our form of mother or father, we then unconsciously try to get from the outside world later on or from other partners, which is they can never fulfill, and it's not their role to fulfill, but we try to anyway because we're not aware of.
Yeah.
Right? There are healthy adult needs, but the inner child comes out with needs that were not met in childhood. So the only way to meet that is to meet those needs yourself via, as Laura mentioned, reparenting, working through the grief, parts work, inner child work, and all of that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll talk about the next one. A mother is also meant to be the person that we turn to when we need support. So we feel that you feel like you can turn to her in emergency. You feel like you can trust that she's going to respond in a loving way and keep you safe. You feel like your needs will be met by her, that she's going to be there for you no matter what. And she also, by the way, needs to be able to tune into your needs even when you can't speak for them yourself, like when you're an infant before you speak. So the way your mother responded to you when you were an infant in distress helps you learn both how to self-regulate, regulate your own emotions, and co-regulate, which means reach out to other people for support and take in their support. So that's like the anxious avoidant attachment dynamic right there. So her role is to help identify your needs, respond to them, help you attune and eventually verbalize your emotions, help you cope with negative emotions. And she helps you do this by empathizing with you and then leading you to a more regulated place. And so I just want to know that the reason we have a lot of mother wounds is because parenting was not like this, actually. That parenting, focusing on teaching the child to name and regulate their emotions, that's a very recent concept. That's not something that was practiced before. It was more like punish the child, send the child to the room. If they're acting out, they need to go to the room or they're grounded. So you were often punished for having anger or sadness or any negative or disruptive emotion.
The conservative right-wing Christian movement is kind of turning back into that too.
Yeah, exactly. And then I want to add on to that is that the mother needs to be a self-regulated and calm person in order to offer this. So if your mother was anxious, dissociated, overstressed, checked out, she can't give to you what she doesn't have within herself. So she needs to be calm enough that she can entrain you to be able to stay calm, even in or to return to a calm place after a difficult emotional experience as an adult. Because when we feel supported by her in this way, we internalize that, and then we become good at self-regulating ourselves, meaning regulating our own difficult emotions. So if we reach for like addictions or distractions, and when we're having a difficult emotion, often that has to do with a lack of ability to self-regulate those emotions, which is what our mother taught to us because she was, she shut down our emotions, or she wasn't there for us in some fundamental way. So we also became, this is really important, you also become capable of receiving support and regulation from others and are able to ask for help and receive support from others when you need it. So you can be both independent and interdependent. So here's something to reflect on. How did you feel when you expressed a need to your mother? Did you feel like she was loving and responsive? Did you feel let down, disappointed, or did you feel like you were a nuisance? Did you get put down, even criticized, or, some people were even abused when they expressed needs? Here's a really also important thing to consider. What do you think your mother's parenting philosophy was? And you can just you don't even need to ask her. You can just reflect on like what was a dominant parenting of that time. So this common one of children are to be seen and not heard, the cry it out thing where you just let the baby cry. And the idea was that the children will self-soothe. And if you meet the child when it's crying, it's coddling it. It's actually the opposite. Did your mother show you that she could also regulate her own difficult emotions? Did you feel really seen and understood and held by your mother when you were experiencing certain difficult emotions? So all of that shows you how you were supported or not supported by your mother.
It's down to the need to be nurtured, of course, right? When we're born, we're not only completely dependent on our mother to meet our physical needs, but more importantly, also our emotional needs. We need to feel like she genuinely loves us, cares about us. We need to feel safe and cared for her by her through her presence, energy. It's not just what she does for us or the way what she talks to us, but the whole presence. A mother can say that she loves us, right? But babies are experts in reading energy. They can tell when the love is not sincere or real. It's very important to understand. A mother can put nurturing care into everything she does, from feeding us to putting us to sleep to how she touches us, speaks to us. We then internalize her love, and we then feel fundamentally lovable as people, which help us to develop true self-esteem and moving in the world that we receive as being a safe place. Now, think about it. Do you have any memories where you felt true love from your mother? Go back into childhood. Does anything stand out? Any scenarios? What did she look like when she loved you? What did that feel like? Or maybe it was absent. Maybe you don't remember that, right? These are also big clues. If you have big gaps of memory from our childhood, that's also clues that maybe certain things have not been met or we dissociated because of the lack of presence of our mother.
Yeah, which also relates to the second point where you need to feel mirrored. So as we mentioned earlier, your mother needs to make you feel seen. We needs to feel like she truly sees us for who we are, not who she wants us to be. That's a key point. And then through her doing this, you start to understand yourself. So, do you ever feel like someone truly gets you? That is actually the role of your mother. And when you're young and you can't yet communicate your emotions, your mother is meant to help you do this. So your mother is meant to help you when you're a child crying, wow, you're really sad right now, and empathize with that. And then that helps you relate to your own sadness in a nurturing way. And then how our mother sees us becomes the template to how we see ourselves. And that's really important. So how your mother sees you became the template to how you see yourself. So if she only sees the bad in you, you're going to grow up with the belief that you're fundamentally bad. If she admires you, and by the way, not in a narcissistic way, this needs to be a sincere and realistic way. So she's not projecting an ideal onto us that's impossible for us to live up to, but she admires you in a very sincere and realistic way, then you develop self-esteem. So her mirroring of you needs to be based in reality. It cannot be based on who she wants you to be. So if she admires you in a way that is distorted by her ideal image of you, it can make us develop both narcissistic traits and or a false self. And then lack of mirroring can create a lifelong need to be seen by others and never really feeling like you get it. And I see this all the time. Is like, and then you'll even get mad at people for like not seeing you in the way that your mother was meant to see you. So this deficiency, it's so fascinating because it's so prevalent in your life. It's affecting so many different elements of how you relate to yourself and the world. But most people can't see it at all because it's all they're used to.
And it's very unconscious.
Yes, it's very unconscious.
The transference.
Exactly. So you want to just reflect, was your mother good at naming and reflecting back your feelings in an empathic way and what you were going through? And you can even reflect on how she is as an adult to see this, because unless your mother suffered some sort of major traumatic event or injury that affected her cognitively, she's most likely going to be a similar version, maybe slightly better or worse than she was as a mother. There's definitely mothers who go on their journey of own inner work and improve and change and become better mothers as an adult, but they're the exception, not the rule. So you want to look at even how she is now if you can't remember how she was back then. And so, when you're having a difficult emotion, does she name those feelings? Does she reflect back to them? Did she acknowledge what you're going through? Does she notice your interest or qualities that are unique to your soul and appreciate them?
Yeah, what really comes down the need to be encouraged in life, obviously, right? We all need encouragement, and especially from our caretakers and our mother, because our mother is really meant to make us feel like we can achieve our dreams and help provide the support we need to go after them, not both mother and father, but specifically the mother. She's there to stand with us and when we're going through a challenge, and we feel stronger because we know she's by our side, right? And there's a big misconception. I think a lot of past false child rearing was the idea when I'm showing the child too much love, almost too much encouragement, all of that we coddle, that we spoil the child.
Yeah.
And that would make it worse. But that creates actually narcissists that actually creates true narcissism. That's the irony. It's the opposite of what's intended. right? Because if you have a positive mother that's there, encourages us, helps us, we feel safe, we become automatically more quote unquote interdependent in life, safe, and definitely not a mommy's boy or girl at all. We actually feel ready to embrace the unknown in the world. Because we internalize ultimately then her support. And then we can explore the world and go after what we truly want without reservation, taking the risks. And so the way she encourages us is extremely important. If she tries to make us fit into some sort of image of perfection, right, then the encouragement will make us feel pressure because we need to live up to an idealized image she has, but she doesn't mirror us of who we truly are. We want to be encouraged to do things that are truly our interests and not what she wants from us. So reflect on it. Do you feel like your mother believed in you truly, nourishing what you truly want? When you accomplish something, was she excited and truly happy for you, right? Sometimes there's also this unconscious weird envy mothers have towards their children, especially towards their daughters and all of that, this weird competition because of her own wound and trauma, and it's just transferred over generations and generations. Did you hear words of encouragement from her that made you feel truly supported, or were you even maybe shamed or put down when something happened and you were blamed for everything instead of holding a space of more nurturing support?
And the encouragement needs to also happen when you feel frustration or you feel a sense of failure too. Your mother is there to be like, hey, I know this is hard. This is a little bit of a roadblock, but you can get through it. And then that becomes our own inner attitude to motivating ourselves. Yeah. So if we just give up at the first sign of difficulty, or we don't even go after what we want, it usually relates to this not feeling supported.
I had to work through that a lot.
Yeah. So I want to also note, so that can be a little bit discouraging to hear, that, like all these points that a lot of people don't have. But let me just acknowledge that your awareness and being able to look at this is a huge step. So if you're able to stay with it and just acknowledge it, maybe if you feel intense emotions, take a break, process it. But I want to add a really important point. So there's a famous term coined by a famous pediatrician and psychoanalyst, D.W. Winnicott. I'm sure some people have heard of him, called the good enough mother. And then you can also call it the good enough father, right? And he basically described that parents don't need to be perfect, but they need to be in sync, attuned, loving, and present with their children 30% of the time. So if your mother was able to do some of the points above 30% of the time, and everyone has stresses in life that come up, moments where they're not feeling connected, that's fine. So when she's out of sync at times, what matters most is she able to repair that and bring herself back into a loving connection with the child? Because when the mother is not attuned to the child at all, the child ends up adapting to the mother and often becomes a people pleaser as an adult. And not having their experience mirrored back by the mother creates this false self that we talked about.
Yeah, and also like putting up the shame or blame. Many parents are listening to this podcast and they maybe feel, oh my God, I'm not always the perfect mother or father. Nobody is. The absolute perfect parents don't exist. Most people who maybe don't have a strong mother or father wound had those parents that were at least 30% present at that time,
yes.
At the very least. And so, again, it's not about this ideal image to live up to.
Exactly. And even if you aren't able to meet any of the points above, your awareness on it is what matters the most. Is that, okay, now you're becoming aware of it. That's better than 95 or more of the percentage of the population. Yeah. And now you can do something about it. So I just want to read a quote by Charles Whitfield. I think this is called From Healing the Child Within. It's an inner child book. And he also talks about what happens with this true self. So he says, when our live true self goes into hiding in order to please a parent figure and survive, a false codependent self emerges to take its place. So that's one thing we forgot to mention is this codependency is also built off of a mother wound. We thus lose our awareness of our true self to such an extent that we actually lose awareness of its existence. And this is when people feel like, some people literally get into careers, jobs, marriages, all fueled by their mother wound, all fueled by the expectations that their mother did or didn't have of them, the pressure she put on them, the need to be loved, accepted. So this can be, he's basically saying it can go to such an extent that you lose awareness of the true self's existence. And then he continues, you lose contact with who you really are. Gradually, we begin to think that we are that false self. So it becomes a habit and finally an addiction. And so this is this is really fascinating to me from a psychological perspective. It's like we can literally live out as this false self in order to please our mother our whole lives. And we then become addicted to it and we don't even realize who we truly are anymore.
I would even argue this is the definition of hell, of being so completely identified with the false self and have completely lost connection to the true self. And then we also, further on, we, like Laura just mentioned, we're building desires, aims, and goals in life that are completely, quote unquote, not stemming from our true self, but as a compensation to cover up this wounded mother image within ourselves. Yeah, and obviously that also relates to attachment styles and attachment wounds in general. The way that your mother both attunes to and responds to you becomes the template to how you relate to others. Very, very important to understand. Not just intimate relationship, any relationship, relate to friends, family, strangers, all of that. So when we have secure attachment, we feel safe to connect to others. And we also feel comfortable being alone. When we have insecure attachment, we may feel anxious or avoidant about making connection with others. And sometimes it's a mix of both. But the more secure attachment you have, you're open to relationships without losing yourself at the same time, right? Without codependency.
Yeah. So some of these common core wounds of the mother archetype. And again, we can also get these from our father as well. I'm not good enough is a big one. So feeling like you're fundamentally unworthy, flawed, that can be through her pressure to be a certain way. That can be through her absence. Sometimes even not knowing ourselves at all can be because she wasn't even there or present. This is a really huge one too. Having an unhealthy relationship with our own body and having an unhealthy relationship with food.
Huge.
Fascinating. So Marianne Woodman covered this in depth in her work, especially in the book Addiction to Perfection. So if you want to learn more about the Jungian perspective of the relationship to the mother and eating disorders, please read that book. But basically, and she actually, this is a quote from her book, the longing for sweets is a longing for love and sweetness from our mother. And that was her own quote, and these are my own notes. So using food for comfort is a longing for comfort from our mother. So basically, those with eating disorders, and I include also what's called orthorexia. So like being focused on purity and like avoiding clean foods, like veganism, any sort of extreme diet can fall into orthorexia.
Any sort of new carnivore diet as well.
Yeah, anything where you're extremely restricted. I mean, I've gone through all of them, so there's no shame in you having this. I also had a mother who had an eating disorder herself. Very interesting. So it's almost like ancestrally baked into me. But all of this is, all these eating disorders, we need to examine how our eating disorder is linked to our relationship to our mother. So let's talk about even this, like what they call orthorexia, which I agree can be misused, right? There's a lot of toxic ingredients in food. It's really important we eat organic and clean. I'm not saying that's wrong, but then it can go too far where there's a focus on purity and overly obsessed with clean eating or having a certain like idea that like I need to eat all alkaline or I need to eat all vegan or I need to eat all keto. And we get set on this very restrictive diet and it becomes an obsession. It consumes us. That's the most important thing is that in my view, and most of the people I know who have a healthy relationship with the food, like they eat clean like 80% of the time, but then 20% of the time, if they go to a restaurant that has seed oils or not organic food, it's not the end of the world to them. Unless they're dealing with some major health stuff that they need to like be really vigilant about. But then again, even the health stuff, the chronic illness stuff can be related to the mother too. So it gets really tricky. But basically, if we have this overly obsession with clean eating, it can be a desire to be perfect picked up from a mother who some way either showed us that that was the right thing or she demanded this from us. So even a hypercritical mother can manifest as an eating disorder. Very interesting, vomiting up food bulimia can be related to wanting to throw up the energy of the toxic mother. So we like gorge ourselves on food representing the comfort from our mother, and then we throw it up. So there's like this weird cycle of like desperately needing that comfort from her, but then rejecting it at the same time. It's very fascinating. Restricting food, which I believe is what Marianne Woodman also dealt with herself, anorexia, can be related to wanting to escape from our bodies and leave them entirely, dissociate. Even this idea of like, people are obsessed with cleansing and fasting. This is this idea of like wanting to float above the clouds and be completely in spirit and not connected to our body and eros and soul. So this is a really huge topic. So if you do have issues with food or complexes around food or difficulties around food or obsessions around food, looking at your relationship to your mother can actually be a way of healing that. And I've dealt with this directly. I know the truth of this in so many ways. All right. So let's move on to healing the mother wound psychologically and spiritually. So psychologically, awareness of the issues above, allowing yourself to feel the real feelings of loss, disappointment, and grief is literally almost like 80 or 90% of the healing work. So getting yourself out of denial of the way that you thought things were and the way things actually were, and allowing yourself to feel those feelings of grief, of loss, of abandonment, whatever, however it shows up for you, is the majority of the work. And so even though listening to this podcast can be difficult at times because it makes you realize what you maybe didn't get, it's difficult because you're getting somewhere deep. So I just want to acknowledge that this is like such a big and important topic, that your awareness and lifting yourself out of denial is a huge step that most people won't take.
Yeah, the awareness is already half of the battle, so to speak, right? And allowing yourself to feel everything that comes up. But even going deeper with that into the more psychospiritual aspect, also somatic aspect, it's important to understand that we do hold karmic knots in the body related to these unprocessed feelings in regards to both our mother and father. That was also a big realization for myself. So in order to transform the wound with our mother, we need to be able to be present with these feelings with full presence. Again, it's all about feeling all feelings, which is easier said than done because most of them we suppress, we're dissociated, we unconsciously don't like to feel, but it's important to allow yourself to, by allowing yourselves to feel them, and a lot of it is grief work, unconscious shame, guilt we have taken on since childhood. We need to process these emotions, these feelings. But it's not easy, that work. And most often, it's very hard to do it on your own. I know for myself, I was not able to fully confront, especially my mother wound, without a professional therapist, right? Or especially it comes up in relationship, definitely. That's both mother and father wounds come up. So if you have a conscious partner and do this work together, it's quote unquote easier, but it can get easily entangled with both your projections. So sometimes it's helpful to find a therapist, right? Who is maybe of the same sex as the parent who wounded you, to repair that relationship. Definitely having some therapeutic relationship or with a professional female therapist has helped me in the process some years ago. But you want definitely a therapist who feels comfortable, who you feel comfortable and safe with, who you can quote unquote vibe with, basically, right? The shoe needs to fit perfectly. But stuff will come up.
It doesn't need to fit perfectly. Sorry, I just want to add that on because that can be laced with our projections.
Yeah. I take that not perfectly, but at least like there needs to be a certain rapport.
Yes, you need to feel like that when you're sharing a story, they're like accurately mirroring you. They're present. You need to feel a sense of like companionship to it.
Because uncomfortable feelings will come up in the process. And there will be transference too, actually, right? You may project whatever you've owned from your mother wound onto the therapist. It's very common as well.
Yeah, and can I say that part actually? So it's really important to be aware that you may end up overlaying onto the therapist your unresolved feelings towards your mother and father. And that's where it gets really intense. And that's where you want to hate them. And that's when you don't want to work with them anymore. And this is actually where the most biggest breakthroughs can happen. If you stay with it and you allow them and you share with them what's going on and you work through it together. Because I see this time and time again. I even see people leave therapists and leave another therapist and leave another therapist because the moment that they start getting into the intense projections and they start reacting to them as if they're mother and father, they demonize the therapist and then they can never go further, actually. And it's very fascinating. So you want to be aware that these unresolved feelings towards your mother and father, if the relationship is important and they're helping you, it will come up.
Yeah.
And when it does, can you express yourself openly to the therapist so that you can both work through it consciously? So the reason that we project onto people who remind us of our parents is we're trying to resolve those feelings, but we have to be aware of this tendency and to be leaning to work with it in order to recover the gold underneath.
Not only professional therapists can help with coaches, or people have projected their unconscious father-mother wound onto us as well.
Yeah, because
right?
we're working in that role.
Exactly. It happens all across the board, but there's an opportunity with that if you're aware of it, instead of feeding the projections and believing them.
And it's very hard. I've had this happen. I've had male and female therapists. I've had it happen with both of them. So I just want to note, how can you tell you're doing it? The intensity of the feeling. So maybe your therapist closes a session in a way that kind of ruffles your feathers or doesn't feel right. And then you have this very intense feeling come up. The more intense the feeling, the more likely it's actually related to some deeper parental wound. I'm not saying that therapists, will be perfect all the time. They won't mess up or whatever, but we have to understand that that's going to be a crucial part of doing the work and repairing that wound. Because if you can have that intense feeling come up and then go back to connection with the therapist and even talk to them about it and help them work through it, then it will repair that wound that you had with your parents. So I really want to note that, because I see that happen very frequently. And then often, if a client is not aware of it, they just blame the therapist. Oh my God, they're just like my mother or father. So a lot of the feelings underneath our mother and father wound is anger and grief. And we often need to first get into the anger before we can feel the grief. And that can be hard. Sometimes people go to the grief right away, but the anger is actually an important stepping stone for many. So you need to allow yourself to fully experience and be with the anger in a healthy and constructive way. And usually it's not going to show up as anger towards her because she's your mother, but it will show up as anger towards your partner, anger towards women in your life. So again, you need to be able to work with your projections consciously and identify them. Sometimes it helps people to write an angry letter to their mother, which they don't send, about all the things they are upset or disappointed or angry about. And you may just be projecting that anger onto a partner as well. So sometimes the anger is not coming up towards her, but it's coming up into your other relationships. So it's your responsibility when that happens to find a constructive way to channel the anger, whether that's a somatic practice like pushing a wall, making a fist, punching a pillow. Somatic experiencing also is a good modality if you want to work with someone. But what's most important is you find a practice that feels right for you to discharge the anger when it comes up. And then underneath the anger is often grief. So grief for the love we didn't get, for the years lost, for the way that she treated us, maybe the way we treated others, the way that it affected our relationships. So we need to be able to grieve deeply for how those parental wounds affected us and our lives, and grieve all of the time that we lost because it was affecting us. And John Bradshaw basically called this healing of the emotional experience we had of our parents' original pain work. And what he meant is that in order to truly heal and create deep change, you need to feel the feelings that weren't safe for you to feel with your parents. So you might feel deep shame or deep anger, grief, fear. The feelings can be quite intense. And sometimes it helps to pendulate between the feeling and something that makes you feel safe, which I'm going to add another exercise to in a moment. So if you have intense feelings coming up, it's your job to feel those feelings, but not beyond the point where it becomes overwhelming for you. And you can do this by calling in a positive memory when it feels like too much and having one ready to go, and then going back and forth between the intense feeling and the positive memory can help you regulate the intensity. So your ability to be with your own emotions in a loving way helps repair the relationship with your mother and your mother wound. So if you can nurture yourself the way that a loving parent could be, and you can be the ideal mother that you didn't have, that can help you repair a lot of the wounds that you missed from your mother. So what I recommend from people when they have this parental wound is try and think of someone who played an ideal mother for you. So maybe you had a grandmother, a relative, or even a fictional character who you would love to have as a mother. And then when you're having a difficult experience, learning how to replace your own actual mother and the way that she maybe criticized you or put you down or wasn't there for you with this ideal mother in order for the healing to happen. So I'll just lead into the ideal parent exercise. So this is going to be just a short meditative practice. You can just listen to it if you're listening to it when you're on the go, and then do it alone. But this ideal mother figure is really important. So I was lucky enough to have a grandmother who I could just kind of replace. And then when I'm having a difficult experience, I bring in my grandmother. And if I'm being critical with myself, which is the way that my mother was with me, I bring in the grandmother. So you want to just imagine, is there any ideal parent figure, someone that you knew even briefly, a teacher at school, a neighbor, a relative, someone who was really, you felt safe with, that you felt really you could trust, who would be there for you when you were having intense emotions. And basically, you're going to imagine yourself as a young child with this mother, with a mother different than the one you had. And this mother is ideally suited to you and your nature. She was your ideal mother. So imagine yourself for a moment, just in your imagination, as a young child with this mother. So if a mother was ideally suited to you and your nature, how would she be towards you? How would it feel to be completely secure in your relationship with her? And how would she be with you that would make you feel completely secure in yourself? So if you imagine that you're going through a difficult experience, something maybe even that actually happened to you as a child that was upsetting, use your imagination to imagine the ways that this ideal mother would be with you. What are the ways that she would make you feel, especially secure and safe? And really take in what it's like to feel completely safe and secure with this ideal mother. Take in how she would make you feel seen, how she could make you feel acknowledged. And just focus on those feelings. And as you focus on them, allow those feelings to expand within you. And so just to close, this ideal parent exercise is really important to practice when you're having a difficult emotion, when you're needing to motivate yourself, when you're feeling abandoned, when you're feeling unlovable, when you're feeling like you want to express a certain need, when you're feeling you want to share more of your gifts with the world, when you're feeling like you want to be more authentic in your relationships, like any of the moments that you're having these difficulties related to these points that we addressed above, you can bring in this ideal mother and begin to use this ideal mother figure as a way of nurturing and supporting and reparenting yourself in the way that your mother wasn't able to. So you want to touch about what we're going to talk about in the second hour?
Yeah, that's a great exercise. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, in the second hour, we're going even deeper now into the anima, Jungian's work, and really healing the inner, quote unquote, feminine and how it plays out in different variations, especially for man, anima possession, and all of that, and what it means to be a more integrated human being based on anima integration. We look deep into how the mother wound affects relationship in general and how we project the mother wound on the world, really, especially in popular culture. And we look at both sides, how the left kind of enthralled by the devouring mother, so to speak, the wounded mother archetype, but also the manosphere conservative red pill man movement is literally mostly based on severe mother wounds. So we will dive deep into that, how that plays out and how that looks like and how we can heal from it, really, right? Because with the polarization, what's happening nowadays in the world, ironically, it's also unconscious shadow projections of collective mother and father wounds. So we talk about that as well. And sharing some more personal stories of our integration process, and much more. So if you don't have access to the second hour yet, you can sign up on my website, veilofreality.com. You get access to the second hour of now over 135 episodes, where we dive deeper with many practical suggestions and tips as well. And with that being said, we'll be right back. Thank you for listening.